Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rimi Khan. I'm a lecturer in the School of Communication and Design here at RMIT University in Vietnam. Today's event is part of the Vietnam Festival of Creativity and Design, which is organised by UNESCO, VCAS, the Vietnam National Institute for Culture and Art Studies, and Collab Vietnam. RMIT is one of the hosts of the festival, so over the next few weeks there will be a whole range of offline and online events that celebrate Vietnam's creativity and culture. Today we have two special guests from Saigon's creative scene to launch the Vietnam 2030 Visions of the Future competition. So this is a program which explores the links between creativity, culture and sustainable development. Vietnam 2030 is a competition, so it is open to young people in Vietnam, asking them to imagine Vietnam in 10 years and to articulate a vision, a creative vision of Vietnam's sustainable development. So there are about 3 weeks for participants to submit their entries for this competition. So we encourage you to get involved, to let your networks know about it. We have some great prizes for this competition. So shortlisted participants will be featured in the Urbanist magazine, as well as in the Briz Asia Festival over in Australia. So please have a look at the Vietnam Festival of Creativity and Design Facebook to find out more about this competition. So joining us this morning are two leading figures from Vietnam's contemporary art world, and they will help us explore the common ground between sustainability and creativity. Our first guest is Udam Trần Nguyễn. Udam is a pioneer of Vietnamese contemporary art whose cross-disciplinary art practice pushes the boundaries of video performance, photography, sculpture, technology and new media art. Initially trained as a sculptor at the Ho Chi Minh Fine Art University, he completed a Bachelor of Art at UCLA and a Master of Fine Arts at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Along the way, he has studied with artists and luminaries of the contemporary art world, such as Charles Ray, Paul McCarthy, Sarah Ge, Bill Viola, and art critic Jerry Saltz. Udam's works have been exhibited at a long list of international venues, including at the Queensland Gallery of Modern Art, the Singapore Art Museum, Yokohama Art Museum in Japan, Whitechapel Gallery in London, the Jewish Museum in New York, Lyon Museum of Contemporary Art in France, and the list goes on. In 2015, Udam won the Jury Selection Prize of the prestigious Japan Media Art Festival and the Buổi Phai Art Prize 2020. His works have been reviewed in many high-profile art journals and magazines, including Art Forum, Flash Art, Hyperallergic, Vietnam News, the New York Times, Bluing Art Info. So I am very much looking forward to hearing Udam speak about his rich and provocative body of work today. Our second guest is Zoe Butt, who is a curator, writer, speaker and educator who lives in Vietnam. Zoe's curatorial practice centres on building critically thinking and historically conscious artistic communities, fostering dialogue among the many cultures of the globalising Souths. Zoe is currently artistic director at the Factory Contemporary Arts Centre here in Saigon, which is Vietnam's first purpose-built space for contemporary art. Zoe has also served as executive director and curator at San Art, and previously held curatorial roles in Beijing, in Brisbane, including the development of the Asia-Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art. Her work has been published by Hatya Khan's Art Review, Independent Curators International and Art Asia Pacific, among others. As a regular public speaker and educator, Zoe's curatorial endeavours also include interdisciplinary dialogue platforms such as Realigning the Cosmos, Conscious Realities, and the online exhibition Embedded Souths. Zoe is a member of the Asian Art Council for the Solomon Guggenheim Museum in New York, and in 2015 was named as a Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum. So we have two very experienced guests who bring a wealth of knowledge about the creative scene in Vietnam. So welcome, Zoe and Udam. And also just a reminder that we are taking questions from our online audience. So please feel free to engage with us through the Facebook live stream and leave your comments and questions along the way. And we'll have some time at the end to respond to your questions. Okay, so I wanted to start the discussion with the word sustainability, because it's a term that we hear a lot about. It's used quite loosely. It's used broadly. The Vietnam 2030 competition is inspired by the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and they use sustainability to refer to climate action, but also to gender equality, education, alleviating poverty, a whole host of social and economic goals, as well as environmental ones. So given that, what does sustainability mean to you? Maybe Udam, I'll start with you.
Okay, so first, thank you for having me. And it's, I think sustainability is actually, we're using that word a lot, like a buzzword. And as an artist, you know, in my profession, I feel like we have been, even artists, you know, when you go to a museum or a gallery, you see painting and sculpture or videos, very beautiful, engaging, and you're thinking, wow, you know, these are work of art. And these artists are kind of far from producing, you know, something that's polluting the environment. But actually, we are quite a big factor in that picture, because after every beautiful sculpture means a tons of trash, you know, from casting, molding, and then wrapping it, you know, boxing it, many layers of foam, and transport it overseas, and a lot of time on an airplane to a museum.
Yeah.
And then when you go to that museum, they took everything you have apart, and they recreated it with their high quality foam packages and send it back to you. You know, it's amazing how much waste that goes into that process. And so as an artist, when I make things, you know, that remind people about that, I still feel guilty, actually, about that whole process. And the bigger you get, the more waste you create along the way. So I have certain skeptical, you know, thinking about what people say when they say that. What do they mean? And from my point of view, I'm just thinking that sustainability means you buy something that you use for a long time, and something that you produce had to be very durable. And at the end, you know, you bring that thing you have after 10 years of using to the right place to recycle. And that's, for me, that's real sustainability. And whatever on the news about this product, you know, that is green, I think it's all, a lot of them are just buzzwords to sell more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that we talk about art and creativity in symbolic terms, and, you know, what the cultural meanings are, but we don't always think about it in material terms, and the fact that you know, this is stuff that is being produced that then gets thrown away, or, you know, we don't really see that side of the art world. That's very interesting. And Zoe, what are your thoughts on the term sustainability?
The term for me is quite simple. It's about giving respect. And I think that starts with the individual. I really believe that if you have a sense of respect for yourself, if you choose to eat processed food, you choose to constantly have takeaway, what are you saying about your own body's health? And I think that once you start to take more concern for your own existence, you start to realize that that is of impact on the rest of the externalities around you, be it your physical environment, the people who live around you. So for me, the term sustainability is two key words: giving respect and understanding impact. But I think in our very materialistically driven world, we focus on that terminology with the focus on the tangible. And I think it's imperative that at this moment in our 21st century lives, particularly all of us suffering this condition of COVID right now, is that we must understand the relationship between the tangible and the intangible, between the mental and the physical.
Yeah, I think that the point that you make about sort of respecting ourselves is important. But I'm also wondering, do you think there's a risk when we are too invested in what's good for ourselves as individuals that we forget about our connections with the wider world?
But that's why respect always comes with impact. You can't just only be righteous and say, I believe in this and therefore, because you have to understand the impact of your beliefs and the impact of your decisions at all costs. So therefore it's interdependent.
Right. Yes, I think interdependency is a really valuable word in these discussions about thinking about the connections between individuals and the wider ecologies that we live in.
Yes.
Yeah. And what about the situation in Vietnam specifically? What do you think are the specific challenges facing Vietnam when thinking about a sustainable future? It's a very broad question.
Do you want to go first?
I mean, it is a very big question. I think the landscape of Vietnam, coming from, say, an environmental perspective, sadly we are a country who contributes immense plastics to the ocean. I think that we are one of the world's worst. So in that regard, we've got a lot of work to do. But what I have taken heed and respect a lot is the community-driven causes and initiatives across the country in the private sector that really demonstrate the collective cultural ethos that I've always appreciated about Vietnam. You have the central parts of Vietnam under flood, and all of these community-driven initiatives start to gather together and think about how they can create better sustainable structures for flood-prone areas. Or you have the Mekong area where farmers have land that is under constant erosion, and it's private initiatives set up to help educate farmers on what other kinds of crop can be planted that will be able to sustain these vastly changing and influx circumstances. So I find that even though we do lack initiatives on a more official level that really seem to be reaching the needs of the general, very basic people on the ground globally, what I do take heart is that it is just a collective, on the ground level action that can really make a difference.
Yeah. I suppose the question is, how do we scale up those sort of grassroots initiatives and community level activities into something that can have a wider impact.
Ultimately, we need government attention.
Yeah.
I think.
And Udam, what do you think about the situation for Vietnam?
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in a little bit on Zoe's mentioning about Vietnam is a big producer of plastics. Because during my, I'm using a lot of plastics. So I read quite a bit and do some research on how plastic that, got recycled. And amazingly, a lot of the first world country, they bring their plastic to the third world. China, and then China refused at some point, and now it's Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines. And if you follow the news, there's many cases that, the president of a country say, Canada, you have to take back, this 300 container full of trash because we cannot take it anymore. And so, it's the one that produced the most plastic refuse to recycle them properly and then bring it to a country like Vietnam. And then Vietnam, of course, they get it for a certain fee. But then the cheapest way to recycle it, to throw it somewhere. And so, that system of recycling doesn't work. And then the people who can pack it on the ship that sent it to Asia, they got a credit for green, carbon, whatever. And so it's just like ridiculous. So that's just one mentioning about plastic in Vietnam. And of course, we are using so much plastic too. And probably a little more than Japan. But Japan has a lot of plastic as well. I don't know how they recycle that. And I used to live in California, and I was so amazed. They put, 3 bins, right? And the green, what's that? Blue, and then what's that? Brown. And I was thinking like, wow, these people are so great. They categorize and they put things in different, trash bin. And so the problem is resolved. But the people who put the trash in those bins never know where the trash goes. And so, you are not responsible anymore. So you feel like, you can buy 10 more things from Costco or Walmart, and you bring it over and you consume with no guilt. And I think that's when green living, recycling, messages from big corporations give you a false message and encourage you to buy more product from them. I think that's a big, big problem. Because you need to tell people like, there's no solution right now.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, this whole idea of recycling kind of just encourages people to keep consuming and then thinking that it's okay for them to sort of put their rubbish somewhere else where they can't see it.
So I think, now I'm doing a project, with the slipper that when you walk on sand, it gives you a message that says, like bas relief on sand, and it says, good traveler, leave no traces. That means you don't carve yourself, name, I love you on a rock, it's just beautiful. Or you throw trash there and you're thinking that, this has the recycle arrows on it. Maybe after 10 years, it's going to dissolve. You have to bring it back and then put it in a proper place. And a lot of, let's say I love milk tea, bubble, boba tea. And I noticed that now they have the drinking tube that they say is recyclable or like, organic stuff that is going to dissolve, right?
Right.
But when you drink, you feel good. But then when you look into it, they say, you have to bring it to a certain factory and put it with the same kind.
Yes, yeah.
And then you put in some chemical, and that's when it's recyclable. So if you have certain extra materials in it that is not that same material, it's gonna go to shit. So it's really There's no solution right now.
Yep.
And I think I just want to get that message out very clearly that we have no solution right now. And you need to consume less. Buy something really, really good and use it for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're often offered these easy solutions that make us feel good because we don't want to really change the way that we live or really confront the systems that need to change. Yeah. And Zoe, did you have anything to add to that?
I would say that it's one thing to put the onus on the consumer, and it's definitely required. You know, I myself also am very conscious of where I eat, how I eat, where I buy, why I buy. But I think we have to really also understand that a lot of people in this world don't have the choice. The economic disadvantages are real. Those at a certain line of living aren't able to make a choice of, I'm not going to be able to buy this fancy soap, which is better for our environment, because I can't afford it. So, you know, there's a need to understand sustainability as access. There's a need to understand sustainability as efficient infrastructure. And there also needs to be an understanding of the social worlds that educate the need. And that's where I think culture comes in. But I'm also aware that pretty globally, the symptom is that culture is the least funded aspect of human production. And yet, our worlds are dominated by fear of fake news, dominated by fears of our next generations growing up conditioned by social media. That is our social worlds. That is an environment that is cultural. And yet we don't seem to emphasize how important the producers of culture are in speaking about the need for balance, about speaking about the role of interdependency, about hearkening the fact that we do have many poor people who care, but are not given the economic or social leverage to be able to make the choice. And I think that's why I commit myself to the work that I do, because it is within the cultural sectors that I think we as contributors, facilitators, makers, supporters have a duty to raise questions and point out the gaps, to say to the broader, complete human and non-human world that we live in, that this is it. It's finite. And I think this is what the SDGs try to, they try to actually point out that this world's not endless. Resources are not endless. There's a limit. But I think we also need to understand that, and it's one I actually think heavily absent element in the SDGs, is the attention to our mental worlds. And as I just mentioned, I do believe that once you create a mental world of support and strength and purpose and respect, that all things sustainable will follow.
Yeah, I think they do sort of talk about cultural sustainability being one of the 4 pillars of sustainability alongside social, economic and environmental, but it also often, I think, gets underplayed. We don't hear about the importance of culture in changing attitudes and systems.
Yeah, and this is also very strongly symptom also within the World Economic Forum.
Right.
There's a tendency to ghettoize culture into its own little bubble, as if it's just sitting there for the elite who can afford the luxury of entertainment. I'm a little tired of culture being boxed as entertainment. It's much more than that. And indeed, a lot of the work that I've done in my short lifetime has been working with artists who are committed to the cause of animal endangerment, to water preservation, to how women are disenfranchised, you know, and these are causes that impact economic advantages, they impact formulations of trade. You know, how about we start to understand that artists are not just sitting on the sidelines as decorative, but they actually can say very important things.
Yeah, I think they have a very important platform
Yes.
in these conversations about sustainability.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good point, Udam, to turn to your work and your own practice and how you have translated these questions about sustainability into your artwork.
Yes.
And I believe we have some images that we can share with our audience. So we'll start scrolling through those images now. But perhaps you could just tell us.
That's 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah,
okay.
we can take as long as it needs. But yeah, if you could tell us a bit about that.
Time. So now we are scoring, right? And
Yes,
it's
yeah.
not on the screen. Okay, so good. You know, when I came back to Vietnam, I am amazed of how many motorcycles that we have. And I got scared, actually. Because when I left, you know, 15 years before, let's say you see 3, and now you say 30. And every day is just like, you know, a holiday. And as holidays, the street was packed. So I couldn't drive my bicycle, my motorcycle for the first week in Vietnam. I got scared. And then I slowly, you know, get to do it. And then I think the first video that Zoe know is the machine equestrian, the dance with a motorcycle. But then I realized that, you know, every motorcycle produces certain amount of air that it's kind of invisible. And, you know, when you stop at the stop light, you can feel it around you. If you wear your short, you can feel it on your leg and sometimes on your face, you know. And I'm curious, and I use a plastic bag and I wrap around my muffler, and I realize that it can really pump it up. And that's my like eureka moment. Like, whoa, yeah, I can do something with this. And it became the first, the second video, which is the serpent's tail. And you can see in the pictures, installation in Esplanade in Singapore, Yokohama, and then picture of the 3 screen, you know, of the video, Serpent's Tails. And so, you know, after Serpent's Tails, I think about the image of the motorcycle rider, like the, you know, Sin Yang, which is a Vietnamese hero that, you know, used to ride an iron horse. And the iron horse then, you know, to defeat the enemy from outside is spewing out smoke, fire. But now, you know, the motorcycle we are riding nowadays is another, we call it iron horse as well in Vietnamese. And they're spewing out smoke. And so, you know, the difference is now the hero of Vietnam, which we are, fighting every day, you know, with the pollution that they created. And which I think is sometimes it's a much harder thing to do when you fight with something that you create. It's like inherent inside of you. And so after the serpent's tail, I take, you know, the image of the women and the man riding motorcycle onto a public art project, and I make it into like a 5-meter, you know, CNC cut metal, and I paint them, and I put it alongside the Hong River, the Red River in Hanoi. And so, you know, along that way, I'm thinking about how to make a work that can impact the audience in a more direct way. And that's when Eco D happened. So Eco and D, you know, D is like Vietnamese to say Đi đi, you know, or let's do it. And so we came up with that word as the name for the artwork. And then we produced a slipper that has the bottom negatively carved the message of Lao Tzu. A good traveler leave no traces. So when you walk on sand, it shows the message as a bas relief on sand. And what I love about this is each of us have a pair of slippers, and we bring it, when we travel, especially to the ocean. And so when you walk, you want something that kind of ephemeral. It's not like you throwing paper that says, let's save the environment. Or you write something on leaves or trees. But now you create something every time you walk. And then after like 10 minutes of walking, you can see the whole beach like covered with that saying. And I think it's going to generate some curiosity and hopefully change humans' habit. Because, one person, two person, and then that message spreading all over the world. I think it's a beautiful way of making an impact on human habit. We're using the power of advertising. It's like Coca-Cola, messages everywhere. And now we have on the beach that message of Lao Tzu of not leaving anything behind or harm the nature. I'm sure he has many meaning up in that message, but we use it in a most practical way. Tell people not to leave any traces, when they visit a place, or maybe create the least impact on nature, which I think in Vietnam is a terrible place to, they destroy nature as fast as they can. I'm not so proud of that.
So there's an important awareness raising aspect to that work.
Yes,
I suppose.
Because I think, every person who owns the pair of slipper, Ekodi, is a performer. You perform with the art, and we are very happy that the work has shortlisted in the Vietnam Design Week.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we are proposing making a poster for the voting right now, because they have 20 works that enter the shortlist. And now we're making the poster so people can vote on it. And then we make mock-up slippers. And so in November, I will send you invitation, and you can go see and try it on the sand in the museum in November.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think it's a work that sounds like it really makes the impact of humans on the environment very clear through the footprints, and it really sort of makes that message very clear to participants in that artwork.
Yeah, because when I came up with this work, I was in an island in Vietnam, and I realized that fishermen don't care, merchants don't care, and government would invite them to a meeting and give them an envelope with some money. They don't care. And let's say the house of the fisherman here, the beach over there, they will throw things just like in front of their, on the beach. And in the morning, they walk through the trash to the boat, and they go. In the evening, they come back, and they walk through the trash, they go to their house. And they throw the trash right in front of them. And so, I'm just thinking that you need some messages that slowly is sinking in, and not so powerfully, forceful, which I think doesn't work for most people, including me. If people pushing me too hard, I will be pushing back. And so I'm just thinking something nice, light, but kind of direct. And the important is repeating all the time for years. And that's when it's sinking into your mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what about the collaborative aspect of your artwork? Because some works are quite participatory, or they involve sort of lots of people kind of that are part of the artwork. Is that an important part of kind of sustainability in your creative practice?
You know, not all the work I make, I aim for that. I'm not really like a environmentalist or a champion of environment, but I do care a lot about that. But you know, like my work, which I show at a factory one time, is the license to draw, which you can use an app on your phone that you can download for free, and you command a robot in the factory, and you can drive it and draw. And I'm just thinking, like, during the COVID time, that work seemed like a perfect work, you know, for people to participate. And you don't have to come to the factory or museum, and you can just stay home, look at Zoom, and then draw, you know. And you can say hi to Zoe over there, and say, hey, Zoe, I want a red pen, and then put in a red pen, you know. And so some work, you know, it's just by default, it involves a lot of people from all over the world, and I work with team as well. So you know, a lot of time, some work you just need a team to develop like the app, and then somebody to develop the hardware for the robot, and I'm kind of the art director in the middle, because the engineer doesn't care about beauty. Yeah, and the app, they just want to write the app, you know, and you have to come in and say, hey, my graphic designer, he has this icon. You need to make it more beautiful, and can you fit it in, you know? And so you are like the one that care about millions of things, and your team has different group, and they care about only one thing. Yeah.
It sounds like an artwork that also had unpredictable outcomes, maybe. And
It is unpredictable.
Yeah.
I think I set up a system, and then people come in, do whatever they want. I never know what's gonna come out. So I have like canvas, like 6 meter, you know, by 6 from the factory, and I just have to roll it up because I have no place to roll it out. And yeah, it's arbitrary. It's like an abstract. I'm thinking it's just like a Jackson Pollock, but drawn by many people from all over the world, you know, and you don't know who they are. Yeah.
I think it's a good example of how art can sort of, you know, produce things that have unpredictable or unanticipated sort of uses that, you know, who knows what a piece of technology like that could be useful for. And like you said, it was the perfect work for the COVID kind of moment. And, you know, there may be other uses in the future or situations where that kind of interaction or collaboration could be really valuable. Yeah. So I think that also brings us back to the value of arts and culture in general in these sort of bigger questions about the social world that we live in and sustainability. So maybe Zoe, I'll ask you how you think creativity can contribute to sustainability, I guess based on your experience as a curator in different institutions in Vietnam.
I guess I perhaps might share a few experiences that I've had that surprised me when over the last 15 or so years of living in Vietnam. Early on I was working at San Art, a very important artist initiative here in Vietnam, in Saigon. And I was approached by several design and architectural firms in the city to give some informal classes to their staff. And I said, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, we need some motivation. We need to talk about what does it mean to be inspired? Where do we find inspiration? they're saying to me that we're getting students of marketing, that they're getting students of communication, but they don't know how to locate that drive, that inspiration to be able to message within their work. And I was quite stunned coming from, at that point I moved from China to Vietnam. And I was deeply then aware that the educational sectors across Vietnam were very much focusing on memorizing, on a study of technique. But very rarely were they supported to think of their own relationship, to talk about their own relationships to issues, to substances, to people, to cause, to events. And I feel that when it comes to connecting questions of creativity to then sustainable ethos in living, is there needs to be a space to which we can discuss, debate, analyze, share opinions, and that then creates differing perspectives, and that is very important when it comes to innovation across any field, is that you need to be able to look at a cup from multiple perspectives so as to understand what it looks like from all the varied walks of life that may eventually see that advertising message or use that building or buy that product. And I think within the creative sectors, that's where we have the most dynamism to be able to feed into broader sectors of society. When it comes to the visual arts, one of the things that I learn each time I work with an artist in developing a work or curate an exhibition or write a critical text is the fundamental need for me to do what I do is to learn. So fundamentally for me, creativity is a process of learning, and it's about understanding that I'm giving back through that learning somehow. And that's what I see cultural infrastructure should be, even educational institutions should be, is what exactly am I giving back to supporting diversity? Creativity should be supporting multiple ways of saying, doing, and circulating.
Yeah, I think that's an important point about what a creative education is, and that it's not just about, you know, filling vacancies in advertising agencies, but, you know, providing a space for these critical discussions about learning to see things from different perspectives.
And it's also about giving depth to those causes. So if you see something on Facebook that you like, be it perhaps you see Udam's work, and he starts to talk about all of these Vietnamese mythologies that are relating to his experiences of contemporary Vietnam, then do I know that mythology? Learn it. Do I understand what he means by saying it's relevant to now? Instead of just dismissing it and saying, "Không biết," make sure you actually ask, sit with the work, look at it again. I think that what we're suffering is a society that likes to dismiss before giving time. And when it comes to the creative sector, we've got some film works. You know, you sit and watch a film by Udam, you really need to give time. Don't just watch the first 5 minutes and say, "Oh, no." Sit and watch it to the very end. Give some respect to actually the labour that goes into these these works of art. And I think it's the same when we buy a new dress or a new pair of shoes. Look at it and ask yourself, how much work went into this? Who produced this work? Are they being given recognition for that work? Have they been monetarily appropriately compensated? Ask yourself, what is my responsibility in saying I'm going to buy this in full know that it's children, exploited perhaps, who have produced it? I mean, connect yourself to how things are produced, why they've been produced. Take some onus. And I think that when it comes to the art world, at least, you know, I think as Udam has just said, he cares deeply about the environment. That's why he's talking about it. It's not just there because of profit.
Right. It's a big issue, isn't it? In Saigon, I think it's such a hub of commerce and commercial activity that I think some of these spaces where we can have these conversations and really spend time to learn don't get valued as much, perhaps. Is that a problem, do you think, for the arts scene in Saigon, like to sort of make a case for the, you know, for this sort of, for these spaces and for these conversations?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Would someone want to buy Prada if they've never walked past a Prada store? Would someone say to themselves that they want to be the next Adidas wearer of the next gym clothing if they don't see the gym clothing as there as possible? I mean, we are visual creatures where we need to see things to believe. So if we can't see an art gallery, if we can't see a museum, if we don't have festivals celebrating contemporary dance, we can't know that this is something that's going to be fulfilling. You know, I've had the chance to kind of visit and travel globally, and I love the fact that on a Friday night, perhaps in Sydney or in London or Beijing, there are incredible theatres and museums open late at night where you can, instead of spending money at a bar getting drunk, you can actually watch a film and be moved entirely into another realm, and you're still sitting in the same space. I mean, those experiences for me are so important. And in Vietnam, sadly, we don't have enough of those spaces. We've got a growing dynamic scene here in Saigon particularly. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why I really love living here and continue to want to be here. But I do think, yeah, we've got a real issue in the great lack of access. And I think it does start with education.
Yeah.
Once we have more makers, there is more need. And once we have those makers, we have different modes around us. You know, Vietnam is, prior to COVID, one of the top destinations within the Southeast Asian region touristically. But we're on the lowest rate of return. Because once we've seen all the heritage sites, once we've been to all of the major cities, the contemporary culture has not been given focus. And so like if you go to Singapore, there's so many different kinds of contemporary festivals. You go to Australia, there is an incredible number of Sydney Biennale, the Biennale of Sydney. Every state has its own, and so there's something exciting to look forward to that reflects the times in which we live. And ultimately, that's contemporary culture. It says to a young person, yes, that's my world. And so we want and need, I think, to give more space to diversity within that.
Yeah, and keeping it dynamic and engaging with contemporary life and youth cultures and all of that sort of stuff, I think is so important. Okay, I think I'm just aware of the time. I think we may have a few questions from the audience. So let me have a look. Okay, so one question from one of our online viewers is how to transfer Vietnamese common people in using sustainable material instead of plastic bags. So how do we create that cultural shift?
May I know that person from Australia or Vietnam?
Let me see.
Because I once read an article on, I think, Tuổi Trẻ, and they say, let's get rid of the motorcycles. I'm like, where are you from? And they're from abroad, you know. It's just very, very impractical. And plastic bag, you know, as much as it's causing certain harm to the environment because you throw it out. It's not when you take it home and you use it 10 times, you wash it. And if you go into a hospital, are you going to ask people not to use a plastic syringe and instead using a wooden one because you love the environment, you know? And I remember my mom, as a nurse, used to boil the glass syringe many times, you know, and reuse it. But we are past that, right? And I think most people, when they go to a hospital now, they will be like, oh, let's hold on to the environmental cause. Give me a syringe from a plastic wrap and make sure it's clean, you know? And don't recycle any of these because I don't want to get back one that, you know, injected to another person. So I think, you know, of course, you know, we will try to keep that down, but I think it has to be very practical. And yeah.
I did read an article that was talking about how, you know, plastic was invented because it could do things that other materials can't do, and it's a very useful material. So, you know, we can't just eliminate the use of plastic overnight without coming up with solutions, or other materials or other ways of living, and that's a much slower process than simply telling people not to use plastic bags.
Yes. I think they might invent something better than plastic, but maybe more harmful than plastic, you know. So sometimes they run around and try to find a solution, and they come up with something more complicated, which I think we try to avoid that. But, you know, if anything that can replace plastic and better for the environment, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also ask the common. The word was common people in the question, right? So how to change people's perceptions of their behaviour is to ask, why do you do this? So there needs to be attention given to these communities, spending time with them, seeing what their lives look like, understanding why plastic is so used. What could be provided can only be known once we understand their social lives. So it's about caring. If we want change, we have to understand the use. I think there's probably so many people across the world who use plastic because they have no choice. So how can we give choice? Which is why I say we've got to look at the diversities within our accessibilities. You know, if someone doesn't have a fridge, a refrigerator, then they can't store their food. If someone doesn't have numerous cloth bags to be able to go shopping, you know, is there a way that we can provide these tools to be able to ensure people can store their food for lengthier time so they don't have to keep going back to the market so regularly? You know, it's about giving some equality to the ways that we live.
Yeah, I think a lot of environmental messaging is very top-down and very, you know, you must do this or you should do this, rather than, as you say, kind of spending time with communities and understanding why they do things or what will actually work.
And that's again another reason why I do also, again, coming back to why I love working with artists. Most of these artists, and I could give so many examples, you can see the factory's website if you care to understand more, but there are many artists who give time to communities in order to create work that will represent them. And sometimes I wish that the commercial initiatives that seem to think that they're addressing the issues facing these people socially, have they really spent time with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. We have another question here, which is, in Vietnam, the price of green products such as fabric is expensive because we need to import from other countries. So how can we solve this problem? So the customer's awareness about green products is sort of a difficult decision. How do they improve this situation? So I think the question is about, if sort of green products and materials are expensive and out of reach for local people, how do we kind of resolve that?
What is a green product? This is a green product.
Yeah, yes.
It's green.
I guess it refers to sustainable materials and products, so maybe sustainable fashion and textiles.
You?
For me, again, it's education. You know, like, I love history. I read history all the time, and I'm quite struck by when you look at human societies that lived before the era of the machine. We knew how to live somewhat sustainably. We were able to make our own liquids to clean our clothes. We were able to turn the fur or hair of an animal into something knitted and woven as a jacket. What we need is to return to history and ask ourselves, what did we do before? So for one, if I have a plant in my house, which happened to me recently, a breakout of fungal infections. It's been so wet, right? So I say to myself, I'm going to have to go and buy a chemical. And then I said to myself, but hang on a minute. There must be a way that I can make my own antifungal spray. So I did a bit of reading. And I found a recipe. And I made it myself.
Oh, very good.
But seriously, this is, this is why I think about the individual. Yes, there's a lot of need for cooperation between top down, bottom up. We have to better understand that how important marketing is, how important therefore education is, but it's also about understanding everything we need is here. Trust that, look for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this also relates to the question of, you're talking about returning to the past. People also say that sustainability is a developed world issue and not something, it's an elitist issue, or it's not for kind of, the masses. Do you think that that's true, or?
Totally disagree. We can't afford to live so blindly like that now. If we care about the fact that the Serbian ice belt is for the first time on record not freezing, we can't just say that that's only the problem of the elitists. We all breathe air.
Yeah. So that's just a problem with the perception of sustainability rather than...
I can understand that perception. If I'm at the lowest rung of the social ladder and I can't get an education and I have no income and my children are starving, I understand the attitude. But still, we cannot afford to think like that in this particular moment.
Yeah.
I like the idea of looking back to the past. Because let's say if I rewind it like to the 1780, I remember that we recycle everything we have. We fix the TV to death, Anything in your house, even like shoes, you don't have new shoes, you sew it when it broke. TV, you fix it 100 times. And then cassette, video, you do that. And every plastic bag, you don't see plastic bag on the road because they picked it. And now you can still see these, cart with one man driving, and there's one person inside sorting trash and put it in 6 different bags. And it used to be kind of like that. And we don't have actual plastic bags to waste. And then I realized that now, fast forward to now, and we have too much, that recycling become a big problem. You cannot recycle anymore. Before, they buy it from you. They come to your house and you have plastic bag, they buy it. But now, you have to give money for them to take it. So, that just means consumption with capitalism comes in. It has become crazy, fast.
Yeah.
That the recycling system doesn't work anymore. So I think looking back to the past like that, I think it's great. Because that you need to slow down your consumption and let the recycler breathe, and the environment too.
Yeah.
So I think every time I saw that cart, you know, going with one person, two person. And I'm just like, wow, you know, I remember that glorious time of Vietnamese recycling center, like mobile. And I'm just thinking like, we can do that, you know, we can totally cut it down and do that again.
Yep. Yeah, okay, so I think we're just coming up to 10 o'clock now, but I wanted to ask one final question, which is, so we've been talking about going back to the past, but what about the future? So very succinctly, if you could tell us, what is your vision for the future and how do you imagine Vietnam in 2030?
I think Zoe can do that.
Well, coming from a person who loves culture, I would love to see Vietnam in 2030 with a contemporary art museum. I would love to see it with a curricula that addresses the histories of contemporary culture, and that it's not just Vietnam's contemporary culture, but the world, fully the world's, not just the West, but the rest of Asia, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, and that we have connection between our educational and cultural sectors that work with broader community in producing makers with conscience.
Yeah. Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Udam?
You know, I remember when I was in Biomusit in Sweden, and one professor asked me like, what do I think about the young, you know, generation of Vietnamese artists, or in general young people in Vietnam? And I'm saying like, you know, I'm very hopeful. And he said, are you painting something rosy here? And he left Vietnam for like 5-6 years already. I'm just thinking, I'm like, no, you know, I talk to you because when I talk to younger people, I think they are more informed than me. They learn, they travel, you know, they have a very good knowledge. And never before they have such a huge number of those youngsters. And I am hopeful. And I think, you know, we're going to have museum, maybe more than one, you know, more art spaces. And, you know, on the weekend, we're not going to just go, you know, drinking or movies, but we're going to go to museums. And I think it's probably possible. Never before, you know, Vietnamese collector has been buying more than foreigners, you know, Vietnamese art. And I think that's a good news too.
Yeah.
And I hope in 10 more years, and they're gonna, you know, have their own gallery, museum, or private collection open to public. So that's what I hope, and I think probably Zoe would agree with that. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be. Yeah. I am hopeful.
Yes, well, yeah, Vietnam has a very young population, so there is a lot of potential there. So good to end on this hopeful note. And thank you. So that was, yeah, really interesting, so much there to think about. Yeah, really appreciate your time and, yeah, all of your insights. So thank you also to the audience for joining us online. This panel was also made possible through a partnership between RMIT and the Australia-Vietnam Youth Leadership Dialogue. So thank you to AVYLD for organising today's event and for organising the Vietnam 2030 competition, which again, there is time to participate in, so please check the festival's Facebook page for more information. But thank you again to our panellists and to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.